Welcome to Drill Down Earnings. A quick look at the latest results out from Cadence Design Systems. This is the business story behind one stock on a move. I'm Cory Johnson, Chief Market Strategist for Epistrophy Capital Research. We look at the 50 most important companies in technology. Cadence Design Systems is certainly one of them. It's a company that helps how other companies design semiconductors and design systems around those semiconductors, which is getting really interesting right here. Wall Street just looks at beat and misses in the second quarter, was kind of in line with revenue expectations, whereas earnings per share, at least adjusted earnings per share, a lot better than expectations, and the stock market seemed to like that. Digging a little bit deeper into the actual numbers, $1.275 billion in revenues, well up from the $1.06 billion a year ago, 20% higher, in fact, on a year-over-year basis. Company raising their guidance for the coming year, for the fiscal 2025 year, as well as their earnings per share guidance and raising those numbers. So again, strong revenue growth for this company of 20% after kind of seeing some doldrums from China export restrictions. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Also in the quarter, their operating profit was hurt by a settlement with the Department of Justice in the US. They had sold $45 million worth of products between 2015 and 2021 that were found to have violated export restrictions, and they're going to pay a $140.6 million fine in the third quarter. So they took a settlement charge in this quarter. They're going to pay some more next quarter, as well as pledging ongoing compliance reforms. Sure. Oops. Big mistake there. Now, most of the revenues, we're going to talk about China here some more, but most of the revenues for this company comes from the Americas. The US is most of that. They stopped breaking that out. But the US has traditionally been most of that, with 49% of revenues in the quarter coming from the Americas, but seeing strong growth in other parts of Asia outside of China, in Europe and the Middle East and Africa, and in Japan. With what? Okay, so there's Cerebus AI Studio launched, and that's an agentic AI implementation platform that they say delivers 20% better power performance and accelerates chip delivery time by multiples, they say. They always say that, and it's probably true, but these things are getting so much more complicated, and yet with their newer tools, they seem to be working. There's also a lot of talk about physical AI. I look out my window here and I see Waymos whizzing by here. My office is here in the Ferry Building in San Francisco. And look, that's AI, that's physical AI, that's AI driving down the street, cars driven by robots. It's kind of an amazing thing to see in this lifetime. They also talked about the great success at their Cadence Live event, debuting this Millennium M2000 supercomputer powered by NVIDIA chips and designed using Cadence tools. And they say it's got 80% higher performance than the stuff that they've seen with prior implementations of Blackwell, and 20 times less power. Look, they want this to be the showcase so that other companies using Cadence systems software can design similar products out there. Their IP business also, just selling sort of chunks of code, posted really strong 25% year-over-year growth, driven by demand for high bandwidth memory, high bandwidth HBM4. So that's the stuff coming out of the likes of Hynix and Micron. Really impressive stuff there. And so their Americas business, I mentioned, growing 20%, but let's talk about China. So they have been restricted from what they can sell into China, in particular export controls hitting in the last year, and that really hurt them. And it hurt them in this quarter, 10% decline in revenues. In fact, the lowest revenues they've seen from China in many years. But what was interesting here is, those restrictions were pulled off last quarter. So while it interrupted sales in the most recent quarter, the quarter they're reporting right now, they say next quarter it's going to be gone and the numbers are going to be back, and the stock seemed to like that. Stock was up 7% in after-hours trading after a 29% gain in the last year. If we look at what the S&P 500 has done in the last year, as of today, look at my screen here, 17% increase in the S&P 500 for the year. So Cadence Design Systems doing so much better than the rest of the S&P, nearly double those results. So they mentioned that China, looking at another way, was only 9% of total revenues in this quarter. It had been 11% the quarter before because of those temporary export restrictions. But while they said the restrictions are gone, and they said China's going to be doing well, the rest of the world's growing so great they don't have to worry about it, it kind of suggested they were being a little cagey about maybe a stronger China business than they wanted to formally guide to, maybe providing some room for some outperformance. I want you to listen to what the CEO had to say and see if you can sort of listen between the lines. Is China doing better or not? It sounded to me like we're suggesting it's going to do a lot better in the third quarter, which has already begun here, of course, in a few weeks into July. Here is Anirudh Devgan, the CEO of Cadence Design.
Long term, I think China, will, of course, is going to invest in chip design and system design, just like all geographies. But I think the percentage of revenue should be similar, or maybe, maybe a little down. But not because China won't do well, but I think the rest of the world is doing phenomenally well, right? All the investment you're seeing in the U.S.
So maybe China outperforms in the third quarter. It's something certainly we want to keep an eye on from Cadence Design Systems. But I just gave you a lot of information. I want to summarize it for you and give you the things you want to remember about the second quarter for Cadence. So Cadence Design Systems, second quarter earnings, pretty good quarter, 20% increase in revenues on a year-over-year basis despite some problems in China, and a really big fine paid out to the Department of Justice for selling things into China back from 2015 to 2021 that they should not have sold then. So they're going to pay they paid a fine in this quarter, $140.6 million in settlements. They've been talking about this for a while, saying it was not going to be material, but it sure hit operating margins in the quarter. But the one number that tells you a whole lot, the drill down earnings bite, is indeed $114,790,000 in sales to China, the least they have sold into China in a very long time. But that's probably just a one-time interruption from the export controls that have now been lifted. China sales might be a wind in their sails in the near future for Cadence Design Systems. All right, thanks for checking out Drill Down Earnings. I'm Cory Johnson. Please follow us on X at Cory TV. And of course, you can see all of our Epistrophy Capital Research earnings summaries here in video on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok at Drill Down Pod. Subscribe so you catch every single one.